It happened on a Thursday night. The kind of night that felt almost too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I just finished dinner, was rinsing dishes in the sink, when there was a knock on my door. It wasn't the hurried, impatient knock of someone selling something, nor the light tap of a casual visitor. It was steady, measured. I dried my hands and opened the door to find Daniel, standing there. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked unsettled. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting briefly over my shoulder as if checking to see if someone else was home. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, not because I didn't want him there, but because the question felt loaded. Still, I stepped aside. He entered, bringing with him the faint scent of rain on his coat. I closed the door and turned to face him. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the window, then back at me, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "I need to tell you something. And I don't know if you're going to believe me." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "All right," he exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. "You remember a few months ago, when you came home and your car had that deep scratch on the side?" I nodded. "Yes. I thought it was from the supermarket parking lot." "Why?" "It wasn't," he said quietly. "It happened here, right outside your house." I frowned. "How do you know that?" "Because I saw it. And I know who did it." The room felt suddenly smaller. "Who?" He hesitated. "Your ex-husband." I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. "What?" "That's Daniel. He hasn't been here in months." "Why would he?" "He has been here," Daniel interrupted, his voice firm but calm. "More than once, late at night. He parks down the street and just sits there, watching your house." I felt my stomach twist. "How do you know this?" "Because I've been watching too," he admitted. "Not in the way you think," he added quickly. When he saw my expression, I noticed things. The first time I thought it was nothing, but then it happened again, and again. And then the night your car was scratched. He stopped, jaw tightening. I confronted him. I stared at him. "You what?" "I told him to leave. That if I saw him near your house again, I'd call the police." The air between us felt charged, part fear, part disbelief, part something else entirely. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Because I didn't want to scare you," he said simply. "And because I wasn't sure if you wanted to know. But after last night." "Last night?" He looked directly at me then, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something protective, almost fierce. He was back. He got out of the car this time, walked right up to your porch. I think he was going to try the door. But when he saw my light, "Come on," he bolted. I felt a chill run through me. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I've been keeping an eye on things because I don't trust him. And because," he paused, swallowing hard, "because I don't like the thought of anything happening to you." The weight of his words pressed into me, making it hard to breathe. All little gestures, the bread, the flowers, the fixed porch light, they weren't just kindness. They were quiet acts of protection. He'd been looking out for me all along, in ways I hadn't even realized. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "But I thought you deserved to know the truth." Silence stretched between us. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping gently against the windows. Finally, I said, "Thank you for telling me, and for all of it." He gave a faint smile. "I'd do it again, every time." Something in my chest shifted than something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just gratitude. It was trust. Real trust. Over the next few weeks, my life subtly changed. Daniel, and I spoke more, not just in passing, but in real conversations. Sometimes over coffee in the morning, sometimes on my porch in the evenings. He was still reserved, still careful, with his words, but there was a warmth now. And somewhere along the way, the idea of him as just my neighbor faded. It was a slow unraveling. A lingering look across the driveway. The way his hand would brush mine when passing me something. The sound of his voice saying my name like it was something worth holding on to. One night, we sat on my porch while the crickets sang in the background. I asked him why he'd moved here. All those years ago. To start over, he said simply. From what? He hesitated, then said, from a life that didn't fit anymore. From someone who didn't see me for who I was. The words landed in a way I couldn't ignore. We weren't so different after all. The unbelievable part wasn't just what he told me about my ex. It was what came after. Because one night, without planning it, without overthinking it, I leaned in and kissed him. And he kissed me back slowly, deeply, like he'd been holding himself back for a long time. When we pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine and said, "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that." I laughed softly, my heart racing. Maybe I do. Looking back now, it's strange to think that all of it started with a loaf of bread left on my porch. Daniel's unexpected kindness didn't just take me by surprise. It changed the way I saw the world. It reminded me that not everyone will hurt you, that sometimes the quietest people are the ones who will stand between you and the things that mean you harm. And maybe the most unbelievable thing of all is that it led me to love again. The next morning began with rain. Not the dramatic, pounding kind that rattles windows, but a soft, steady drizzle that makes the whole world feel muted. I pulled on a sweater, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door, hoping to get to the office. Early for once. But the moment I stepped outside, I stopped short. There, on my porch, was a small cardboard box. No label. No note. Just sitting there, dampened by the misty air. I bent down, half expecting it to be a delivery I'd forgotten about. But when I opened it, I froze. Inside was a loaf of bread still warm. The scent hit me instantly. Fresh baked. Slightly sweet. The kind of smell that makes you forget, for just a second, about everything else. I glanced toward Daniel's house. His curtains were open for once, but the front door remained closed. I had no reason to think it was from him. And yet, something about the quiet placement, the absence of a note, the way it was just there. It felt like his style. Understated. No fuss. I carried it inside, placing it on my kitchen counter. It was absurd how much a loaf of bread could occupy my thoughts. All day at work, I kept thinking about it. Who goes out of their way to leave fresh bread for a neighbor without saying a word? That evening, when I got home, I found Daniel in his driveway unloading groceries from the trunk of his car. He saw me approaching and gave a brief nod. Before I could second-guess myself, I said, "Was it you?" He looked at me, brow furrowed. Was what me? The bread on my porch this morning. For a second, I thought he'd deny it. Then the faintest smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Maybe? I crossed my arms, trying not to smile back. Why? He shrugged, closing the trunk. You've seemed tired lately. Figured you could use something warm in the morning. It was such a simple explanation, but it hit me in a way I didn't expect. People didn't notice things like that anymore, not in my life, at least. I was so used to moving through my days invisible, blending into the blur of office deadlines and grocery lists. for someone to actually see me. It was disarming. I thanked him, my voice softer than I intended. He just nodded again, as if it was no big deal, and headed inside. Over the next week, little things began to happen. On Wednesday, I came home to find my trash bins rolled neatly back from the curb, something I hadn't had time to do in the morning rush. On Friday, a small bouquet of wildflowers appeared in a mason jar on my porch, their stems still dripping with water. And on Sunday morning, as I struggled with a stubborn flat tire, Daniel appeared wordlessly with a jack and fixed it before. I could even protest. It wasn't the kind of kindness that demands attention. He didn't linger for thanks. He didn't make it about himself. He just did these things and moved on, leaving me wondering why. The truth was, I wasn't used to it. My marriage had been years of feeling like I was always asking for too much, even when all I wanted was the smallest gesture of care. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped expecting anything from anyone. So when Daniel began really noticing, it stirred something in me that I wasn't ready for. One evening, about a week after the bread, I found myself baking for the first time in months. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the quiet satisfaction of giving something back. I made a batch of lemon bars, the way my mother used to, with extra powdered sugar on top. I wrapped half in foil and knocked on Daniel's door. He opened it after a moment, wearing a grey t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly mussed. The inside of his house was warm, filled with the faint scent of coffee and something woodsy cedar. Maybe. I thought I'd return the favor, I said, holding out the foil. He accepted it with that same almost smile. Lemon bars? You can tell from the outside. My mother used to make them, he said quietly. Something about the way he said it soft, almost hesitant, made me curious. But before I could ask, he stepped back slightly, as though unsure whether to invite me in. I didn't push. I just smiled, wished him a good night, and headed home. A few days later, I got home late. The office had been a nightmare, and I was carrying the exhaustion of a dozen small frustrations. It was raining again, harder this time. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my porch light was out. I groaned inwardly. Another thing to fix. But when I stepped out of the car, umbrella in hand, I realized the light wasn't out. It had been replaced. A new, brighter bulb glowed warmly, casting light across the wet steps. And taped to the door was a note in neat handwriting. Figured you'd appreciate not fumbling with keys in the dark. Dee stood there for a long moment, the rain tapping softly against my umbrella. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. Daniel's kindness wasn't random. It wasn't born of obligation or neighborly politeness. It was intentional. And that was the most surprising thing of all. It's one thing for someone to help you when you ask. It's another for them to notice what you need before you even realize you need it. I didn't know what his reasons were, or if they even mattered. But slowly, without me noticing, the man I'd barely spoken to in 4 years had become the person who made me feel seen, and I didn't know whether to be grateful or afraid of what that meant. It had always been just polite hellos and quick nods between me and Daniel, my neighbor. We lived side by side for nearly 4 years, and yet I knew so little about him. He was the kind of man who kept to himself, someone who moved quietly, spoke little, and seemed to float in and out of his house like a shadow. I'd see him early in the mornings, stepping out with a coffee thermos in hand, dressed in crisp shirts and dark trousers, his hair perfectly in place, as though he were walking straight into a photograph of our relationship, if you could even call it that. Had always been built on the occasional small gesture, a door held open, a package handed over when it was mistakenly delivered to his porch, or a brief morning when our paths crossed. Never anything more. It wasn't that I didn't want to know him better, but there was something about him that seemed wrapped in layers. A quiet distance that warned you not to pry. At first, I thought it was just his nature. Some people simply prefer solitude. But there were times, little moments that made me wonder. Like when I'd catch him standing on his balcony late at night, staring out into the street, his expression unreadable. Or the way he sometimes paused mid-step when he saw me struggling with groceries, as if debating whether to offer help, before turning away quickly. I'd learned a little about him from the neighborhood grapevine. He worked in finance, was in his late 30s, and apparently had lived alone ever since moving here. A few neighbors whispered about how he'd once been married, but that had ended badly. No one knew the details, only that it left him quieter than before. For me, life went on without much thought to Daniel beyond those passing interactions. I had my own world to manage, work deadlines, a house that seemed to fall apart in new ways every month, and a personal life that, frankly, had been running on autopilot. I'd been separated from my husband for over a year, though we hadn't finalized the divorce. The absence of love had long preceded the absence of his presence, and by the time he moved out, there was nothing left but paperwork. It was one of those quiet, exhausting endings that left you too tired to start over. Maybe that's why I never gave much thought to the man next door. My emotional energy was spent on simply getting through each week. Still, I couldn't help but notice that Daniel was different from the other neighbors. There was no casual small talk, no invitations to backyard barbecues, no loud music or late-night gatherings. His house was immaculate, every hedge trimmed, every curtain perfectly aligned. It was the home of someone who needed order, maybe even control. I remember one evening last spring, I was in my garden planting tulips when I heard a faint cough from the other side of the fence. I glanced up, and there he was kneeling by a row of perfectly pruned roses, wearing black gardening gloves. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and for the first time, I noticed the faint scar running along his forearm. It wasn't the kind of scar you get from a kitchen accident. Our eyes met briefly. He gave me a polite nod, then went back to his roses as if we hadn't shared that fleeting connection. I remember wondering then, in a way I hadn't before, what stories he carried that no one knew. But I didn't dwell on it. Life has a way of moving you along, and soon enough, Daniel returned to being just my neighbor, the man I waved to on the sidewalk without really seeing. Until the week everything changed. It started as an ordinary Tuesday. The kind of day where the hours blur together because nothing stands out. I woke up late, rushed through my morning routine, and nearly spilled coffee on my blouse before running out the door. Work was the usual: emails, meetings, more emails, and the slow, soul-draining tick of the clock. By the time I got home, the sun was already dipping low, painting the sky in shades of amber and deep rose. I parked in the driveway and noticed Daniel's car was gone. Not unusual. He often worked late. His porch light was off, and his curtains were drawn. I thought nothing of it as I fumbled with my keys and stepped inside my own house. That night, as I settled on the couch with a blanket and an uninspired dinner of leftover pasta, I remember glancing toward the window. Daniel's house was still dark. A strange feeling settled in me, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was just habit. Seeing his lights on was as much a part of the neighborhood's rhythm as the street lamp that flickered at the corner. Without it, the street felt different. I shook it off. After all, what did I really know about Daniel? But even then, I couldn't have imagined that within days something would happen, something so out of the ordinary, so completely unexpected that it would not only change how I saw him, but how I saw myself. At that point, I had no idea I was standing at the quiet edge of a story that would take me places I never thought I'd go.